Oliver Bennett walked into the Merrick Auto showroom wearing a faded jacket and holding his 6-year-old daughter's hand. The marble floors gleamed. The staff barely looked up. Then Eleanor Voss walked in CEO blazer, designer heels, the kind of woman who expected rooms to rearrange themselves around her. She looked at Oliver. She looked at Luna, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She smiled, not a kind smile. "Sir, the bus station is 2 blocks east," she said, loud enough for the entire showroom to hear. Laughter rippled across the room. Oliver said nothing. He simply checked his watch. He had exactly 4 minutes before everything changed. Keep watching. The moment she realizes who he truly is will leave you completely speechless. The morning had started quietly, the way Oliver Bennett preferred his mornings. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms on the 4th floor of a building in Evanston, just north of Chicago, but it was clean, and it was theirs. He stood at the stove, scrambling eggs, while Luna sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, carefully arranging a small plastic family of horses on the placemat beside her orange juice. A framed photograph sat on the shelf above the television. A woman with dark hair and a wide smile, caught mid-laugh at some beach no one in the family had been able to name anymore. Oliver's wife, Claire. Luna's mother. 3 years gone. Taken in a highway accident on a February evening that Oliver had replayed more times than he could count. He set the plate in front of Luna, and she looked up at him the way she always did in the morning, like he was the most reliable thing in the world, and she needed to confirm that before breakfast. "Where are we going today?" she asked, stabbing a forkful of egg. "Dealership," Oliver said, pouring his coffee. Luna considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could bring to a Tuesday. "A car place? That's right. For you? Or for me?" Oliver smiled at his coffee mug. "For both of us." Luna nodded, satisfied, and returned to her horses. Oliver's phone buzzed on the counter, and he turned it face up long enough to read the subject line of the email that had arrived at 6 that morning from the Merrick internal audit team. The subject read, Q3 discrepancy. Chicago flagship. Confirmed 2.1 million. He had been briefed the previous week. The numbers had been reviewed twice. What the audit team could not give him was a picture of how the showroom actually ran on a Tuesday morning when no one important was expected. That was what he had come for. He typed a forward reply on my way now and put the phone in his jacket pocket. The jacket was faded navy, the kind that had been washed too many times. Oliver owned better coats. He had chosen this one deliberately, the way a man who understood how the world worked might choose to enter a room before anyone knew to perform for him. He helped Luna button her cardigan, retied one of her laces that had come undone in her right shoe, and lifted her stuffed rabbit, a worn cotton thing she called Biscuit, from the back of the couch, where it had spent the night. Luna tucked it under her arm without looking. It was a gesture so automatic it was almost unconscious, a habit that had started the week after Claire's funeral and had never stopped. Oliver had thought, in the beginning, that the rabbit would become a crutch she would need to be separated from eventually. 3 years later, he had decided that some things were not crutches. Some things were just how a person carried what they had lost, and there was nothing wrong with that. Oliver locked the apartment, took Luna's hand, and walked to the elevator. Across the city, inside a black SUV moving north on Michigan Avenue, Eleanor Voss was finishing a call she had not wanted to take. Her assistant's voice came through the car speaker with the practiced neutrality of someone who had learned that the space between facts and their delivery mattered enormously when the facts were unpleasant. The board wanted a leadership review. 3 senior shareholders, men who had been skeptical of Eleanor from the first week she had taken the CEO role at Voss Capital Group, had been circulating a memo suggesting the company needed experienced external stewardship to manage the upcoming merger cycle. Eleanor had known about the memo for 48 hours. She had not yet decided whether to confront it directly or let it surface in the Thursday board meeting and destroy it there in front of everyone who had signed it. "Tell them I didn't build this company to hand it to someone's nephew," she said, and ended the call. She was 29 years old. She had grown Voss Capital's commercial real estate portfolio by 62% in 3 years. She had closed 4 acquisitions that her predecessors had abandoned as too complicated, had restructured a debt arrangement that had been quietly hemorrhaging for a decade, and had done all of it while managing a board of 6 men who ranged in attitude from patronizing to openly hostile. She had not taken a vacation in 2 years. She had not had dinner with anyone who was not a client or a counterparty in longer than she could recall without effort. She was not accustomed to losing. She was not planning to start. The SUV pulled up to the Merrick Auto Chicago flagship on North Clark Street, a wide-fronted showroom with floor-to-ceiling glass and a row of luxury vehicles parked at precise angles just inside. Eleanor had ordered the car 6 weeks earlier. Midnight sapphire exterior, cream leather interior, the Continental GT in the configuration she had specified down to the contrast stitching. $245,000, a number that meant nothing to her practically, but that she had chosen because it was exactly the kind of purchase that announced to the world that the girl who had once stood in a Boston lobby, hoping her one good blouse would be enough, was finished apologizing for taking up space. Richard Cole met her at the entrance. He was 47, broad-shouldered, and wore the expression of a man who had spent 20 years perfecting the art of making wealthy people feel welcome. He extended his hand before she had fully cleared the doorway. "Miss Voss, your car is ready. We had it detailed twice." "Good," Eleanor said, stepping inside. The showroom was cool and quiet, the kind of quiet that cost money to maintain. She let her eyes move across the floor, 3 sedans on rotating platforms, 2 SUVs near the far wall, a sports model with the hood propped open for display. It was near that car that she noticed the man. He was crouched at the open hood of the display vehicle, a young girl beside him, both of them looking at the engine. The man was pointing at something and speaking in a low voice, and the girl, who could not have been older than 6, was listening with the expression of someone trying very hard to understand something important. The man's jacket was old. His shoes had worn heels. He was not wearing a watch. He did not look like someone who belonged on this floor. Eleanor's assessment took 3 seconds. She had spent a decade making assessments exactly that fast. It was a skill she had built from necessity, a shortcut that had served her well in boardrooms and investment committees, and across negotiating tables. She had never been wrong enough, often enough, to examine it. Richard leaned slightly toward her as they walked. "Your car is just this way," he said. They were perhaps 10 feet from Oliver, and when the girl stepped back to look at something on the side panel, and her rabbit dropped from under her arm. It fell on the marble without a sound and landed just at the edge of Eleanor's path. Eleanor stopped. She looked down at the rabbit-worn cotton, one ear slightly flattened, a small red bow around its neck that had been retied so many times the knot was thick. Then she looked up at the man still crouching by the hood. She looked at him the way she sometimes looked at line items in a financial report that did not add up to anything useful, and she made a decision she would spend the rest of the afternoon wishing she could take back. "Richard," she said, not quietly, "is this a test drive or a field trip? The gentleman looks like he took a wrong turn from the auto repair shop next door." 2 members of the sales staff standing near the reception desk laughed. Richard said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. One of the laughs was louder than the other. Eleanor was not finished. She stepped around the rabbit without picking it up and added, in the kind of voice that carries further than its speaker intends, "Sir, I don't mean to be rude, but perhaps the pre-owned lot 2 streets down would be more appropriate for your budget." She glanced at the girl, and something that might have been an attempt at warmth passed across her face. "For what it's worth, the rabbit is cute." It was not a cruel line, precisely. It was something worse than cruel. It was dismissive, the kind of thing said by someone who genuinely does not believe the person they are speaking to is worth the full weight of their attention. Oliver straightened slowly. He turned to face Eleanor for the first time, and what she saw in his face was not what she expected. There was no embarrassment. There was no anger. His expression was entirely calm, in the way that deep water is calm, not because nothing is moving beneath the surface, but because whatever is moving there is too large to disturb the top. He bent and picked up the rabbit. He handed it to the girl without looking away from Eleanor. Then he crouched down to the girl's height unhurried, completely deliberate, and said, in a voice pitched precisely loud enough for the room to hear, "That's not right, Luna. We're here because we need to be here. The reason why you'll see." Luna looked at him for a moment, then nodded with the grave confidence of someone who had learned to trust that statement completely. Oliver stood. His phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He checked the screen, and something in his posture shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that would have meant anything to someone watching, but Eleanor noticed it. He excused himself a half step to the left and took the call. A young sales associate, early 20s, dark-haired, with the look of someone who had not yet learned how to pretend, came over to Luna with a small bottle of water and a genuine smile. "Hey, you want to sit down over there? They have good chairs." Luna looked at her rabbit, then at the young man, then nodded. Eleanor watched Oliver from across the showroom floor. He stood with his back slightly turned, speaking quietly into the phone. He was not scrolling, not pacing, not filling the silence the way most people did when they were uncomfortable. He was standing in the middle of a showroom that had just publicly decided he did not belong there, and he was standing as if that fact had no particular weight for him. It bothered Eleanor in a way she could not immediately name. She turned back to Richard. "Let's do the paperwork," she said. Richard had the documents ready at a side desk title, Registration Transfer, Delivery Confirmation. Eleanor uncapped the pen. She had signed documents worth 10 times this amount without pausing, but for some reason her hand moved slightly slower than usual, and she found herself glancing toward Oliver again. Richard followed her gaze and said, quietly, "Don't mind him. We get the type occasionally. Probably just browsing." Eleanor capped the pen. She did not respond. What Eleanor did not know, what no one in the Chicago flagship knew, except the woman who had been on the phone with Oliver 6 minutes earlier, was that Oliver Bennett had not walked into Merrick Auto that morning as a customer. 3 years prior, when the Merrick Auto Group had been carrying a debt load that threatened to take 4 of its 8 locations into receivership, Oliver had been one of 3 investors who had stepped in with a recapitalization plan. His portion of the equity was 34%, the largest individual stake in the chain. He had structured his involvement as a silent position, which meant his name appeared in legal filings and annual reports, but not on showroom walls, not on company websites, and not in any piece of public communication the brand produced. He had requested it that way. He had reasons he did not discuss. He had spent 2 years watching Merrick recover, watching revenue climb across 7 of the 8 locations, watching the brand rebuild something that looked like stability, until a routine quarterly audit had turned up irregularities in the Chicago flagship's financial records. $2.1 million across 18 months. The audit team had identified a pattern. Vehicles marked as sold in the central system were being transferred to a secondary dealership called Colton Motors, a used car operation with a majority owner who turned out to be the brother-in-law of Richard Cole. Service and detailing costs had been inflated by $180,000 over 6 months. 2 extended warranty contracts had been sold outside the central reporting system entirely. Oliver had read the full report on Sunday evening. He had not called Richard. He had not sent a legal notice. He had come in person, unannounced, in a faded jacket, to watch how the man ran his floor before anyone knew to behave differently. He had already seen enough. When he ended the call, Margaret Hale, the executive administrator at Merrick's headquarters 10 minutes away, confirming she was en route with the full audit documents, he put the phone in his pocket and turned to find Richard watching him from beside the documentation desk. Richard crossed the floor with a customer service smile that did not reach anywhere near his eyes. "Sir, is there something specific I can help you with today? Or perhaps you'd be more comfortable if I—" "Actually, Richard," Oliver said, and his voice was exactly as calm as his face had been since he walked in. "I think you should call Margaret Hale. Tell her Oliver Bennett is here." The smile on Richard's face did not disappear all at once. It dissolved, like something chemical, first the eyes, then the corners of the mouth, until what was left was a man who had just understood, in a single sentence, how badly he had miscalculated the morning. He said nothing for 4 seconds. He started. "She's already on her way," Oliver said. Margaret Hale arrived 7 minutes later in a navy blazer, carrying a folder thick enough to mean business. She was 56, efficient, and possessed of the particular calm that belongs to people who have spent decades working in rooms where other people were losing their composure. She shook Oliver's hand. "Mr. Bennett, we've been expecting your visit. Just not quite this showroom," and then looked at Richard with an expression that required no elaboration. "I think we need the conference room," she said. Now, the young sales associate Jake, Oliver had heard someone use his name twice that morning, had been standing near the display vehicle throughout all of this. He was now staring at the name on the cover of the folder Margaret was carrying, and then staring at Oliver, and then doing the calculation that produced an expression of complete disbelief. The man in the faded jacket. Eleanor Voss had been standing beside her new car, which was now no longer the most important thing in the room, and she had heard every word. She watched Margaret explain, in a carrying voice that was not accidental, that Oliver Bennett held 34% of Merrick Auto Group, that he was the chain's largest individual shareholder, and that the Chicago flagship was open today in large part because of decisions he had made 3 years ago when no one else wanted to make them. The showroom was quiet in a different way than it had been before. Eleanor did not move for a moment. She stood with the pen still in her hand and replayed the last 20 minutes with the particular precision of someone who had built a career on never being wrong and was now, without question, looking at the evidence that she had been. The bus station is 2 blocks east. Perhaps the pre-owned lot would be more appropriate for your budget. She had said both of those things to the man who owned the building she was standing in. She had said them in front of his 6-year-old daughter. And the part that sat worst, the part she could not smooth into something more manageable, was that the only reason she regretted saying them was not that she'd been caught. It was that she remembered, very clearly, being 19 years old and standing in a Boston office lobby in a blouse she had ironed twice, and having a woman at the reception desk look her over and say, "We typically hire from better schools." She remembered the specific quality of that silence, after how it had the texture of something permanent. She had promised herself, in the elevator on the way back down, that she would never be the person who made a room feel that small for someone else, and she had just been exactly that person. To a man who was standing quietly in the middle of it, making no attempt to defend himself, because he had no need to. She set the pen down on the desk. Jake was still nearby, doing something near the welcome desk that was mostly a reason to stay close without appearing to. Eleanor looked at him. "Where is the little girl?" she asked. He pointed to the corner seating area, 2 low sofas, and a small table with magazines where Luna was sitting cross-legged, biscuit in her lap, drawing in a small notebook she must have had in the pocket of her cardigan. Eleanor walked over. She did not perch on the edge of the sofa. She did what she had watched Oliver do, what she had registered without fully naming at the time she sat down on the floor, at the girl's level, and waited for Luna to look up. Luna looked up. "Hi," Eleanor said. "My name is Eleanor. I said something really unkind to your dad earlier. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry." Luna studied her with the unsentimental clarity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend assessments are warmer than they are. "Why did you say it?" Luna asked. Eleanor considered being diplomatic. She decided against it. "Because I looked at him and decided I knew something about him before I actually knew anything. That was wrong." Luna thought about this. Then she said, with a matter-of-factness that landed harder than any accusation, "Bah, my dad, he says people say mean things when they're hurting something else." She looked at Eleanor for another moment. Then she held out the page she had been drawing on. It was a house, 2 adult figures and 1 small figure standing in front of it. A small rabbit shape near the door. Crayon on white paper, wobbly but deliberate. Eleanor took the drawing and held it. In the conference room, Oliver sat across from Richard and Margaret, with the audit files open on the table between them. Richard had already moved through 3 phases: denial, technical explanation, and the beginning of something that looked like the edge of cooperation. Oliver let him reach that edge before speaking. 17 vehicles marked sold in the central system, transferred to Colton Motors. $180,000 in detailing costs that don't correspond to any service records. 2 warranty contracts that never entered the reporting system. Oliver laid his hand flat on the folder. "I'm not law enforcement, Richard. I'm a shareholder. What you do in the next 5 minutes determines whether this stays internal or goes somewhere else." He pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a separation agreement, voluntary resignation, full repayment schedule, and a non-disclosure covenant in both directions. The alternative, which was not stated on the paper but which everyone in the room understood, was a federal referral. Richard picked up the pen. His hand was not steady. When he had finished signing, Oliver gathered the documents and stood. He looked at Margaret. Get Jake on an interim management track. I watched him work this morning. He treated my daughter well when no one was paying attention. That tells you most of what you need to know about a person. Margaret wrote the name down without comment. Oliver walked back out onto the showroom floor and stopped. Eleanor was sitting on the floor of the waiting area with Luna, both of them looking at the drawing together. Luna was explaining something with one finger, tracing the outline of the house. Eleanor was listening the way people rarely listen, without any part of her attention reserved for what she was going to say next. Oliver stood there for a moment before she noticed him. When she did, she got to her feet in a single unhurried motion, the way someone moves when they have decided they are not going to perform composure but simply have it. There was a pause between them. Not awkward, not comfortable exactly, but weighted in the way that moments are when both people in them know that something has already been said that cannot be unsaid, and something else has not yet been said that needs to be. I owe you an apology, Eleanor said, and I want to say it the right way, which means not saying it was an accident or that I didn't know who you were. I didn't, but it was wrong before that became true, and it would have been wrong either way. Oliver looked at her for a moment. Luna told me what you said to her. He paused. That took something. He didn't expand on it. He didn't need to. Luna appeared at his side and tugged his sleeve. Bah, she sat on the floor, like you do. Oliver glanced down at his daughter, then back at Eleanor, and the thing in his expression shifted not dramatically, but in the direction of something less guarded. He asked her what she was building at Voss Capital. She told him the merger pipeline, the portfolio restructuring, the board situation she had not mentioned to anyone outside the company. She did not know why she told him. It came out the way things do when the person listening is genuinely present, rather than waiting for a gap to speak. He asked it differently from the way people usually asked, not impressed, not skeptical, just curious. Like a man who understood what it cost to build something from a starting point of nothing and no one backing you. She asked him why he had stayed silent as a shareholder, why no one in any of the Merrick locations knew his face. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because the moment people know what you own, they stop seeing who you are. Eleanor did not have an answer to that. She had spent 10 years making sure people knew exactly what she owned. She had never once considered what it had cost her in the other direction. Jake came over with 3 bottles of water unprompted, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had decided to be useful rather than wait to be asked. Luna took hers, drank half of it in one go, and then looked at Eleanor with the frank curiosity of a child who has decided someone is interesting. Do you like rabbits? She asked. Eleanor looked at Biscuit, who was currently balanced on Luna's knee with the resigned dignity of a stuffed animal that has been through a great deal. I think I'm starting to, she said. Luna nodded, as if this were the correct answer, and she had expected it. Eleanor's phone had been vibrating in her blazer pocket for the past 11 minutes. She knew what the calls were before she looked her assistant, the assistant again, and then a number she recognized as belonging to one of the 3 board members who had been circulating the memo. The Thursday meeting had apparently been moved to that afternoon. They had scheduled it without her. They were likely in the building right now. She excused herself, stepped away, looked at the screen, and made the decision in approximately 4 seconds. She walked back. Oliver was standing near the display vehicle again, pointing something out to Luna, with the same patience he had shown that morning, as if nothing that had happened in the last hour had changed the fundamental pace at which he operated. The board meeting, Eleanor said. Is it at the Meridian Tower? Oliver glanced at her. He had not moved to check his phone. I heard you step away, he said. And you came back. Is it at the Meridian Tower? She repeated. Why? Before she could answer, Margaret, who was passing behind them with a revised operations file, said quietly, Mr. Bennett, Voss Capital holds the lease on 3 floors in the Merrick commercial property portfolio. The Meridian Tower location is one of them. Eleanor absorbed this without expression. Oliver looked at her for a moment. The board meeting. Yes. 15th floor. I own the 14th. He picked up his car keys from where he had set them on the edge of the display stand and turned them once in his hand. You don't need me to do anything. I'm not offering to walk in there and fix it for you, but if you want someone in the room who understands what it actually takes to build something, Someone who has no reason to perform for either side. I can be there. Eleanor had spent the last decade doing everything herself. She had not asked for help from anyone who did not have a contractual reason to provide it, and she had not trusted anyone who had not earned that trust across multiple high-stakes transactions. She operated on a principle that if you needed someone in the room, you had already lost something. She was standing in a car dealership, 40 minutes from a board meeting that might end her tenure, holding a crayon drawing of a house with a rabbit by the door, and the most useful thing she had encountered all day was a man in a faded jacket who had refused to raise his voice once. "I'll be there," she said. Oliver nodded once, as if this were a reasonable business decision and nothing more, and bent down to lift Luna into the crook of his arm. Luna looked at Eleanor over her father's shoulder. "She's coming with us, Pa?" "Looks that way," Oliver said, steering toward the door. Luna considered this. "Okay, but Biscuit comes too." "Biscuit always comes," Oliver said. "Good," Luna said, and settled her chin on his shoulder, with the finality of someone who has managed the important details and can now be at peace. Outside, Chicago in the early afternoon was doing what Chicago does in October, pressing a clean, cold light across the pavement and making everything look slightly more resolved than it felt. Oliver got Luna settled in the back seat of his car, buckled her in, straightened up. Eleanor was standing at the door of her car. She was not making a call. She was not looking at her phone. She was watching Oliver close the car door gently, the way someone watches a thing that is ordinary and rare at the same time. He turned and saw her watching. She didn't pretend she wasn't. "I've spent 10 years deciding who people are in the first 5 seconds, she said. It was not a confession designed to land in any particular way. It was just true, and she had reached the age where she had run out of patience for pretending things that were true were something else. "I've been wrong before. Today was different." "Different how?" I said it out loud. He held her gaze for a moment. "Most people never do." It was not forgiveness. It was not the beginning of something easy. It was two people standing on either side of a morning that had rearranged something between them and acknowledging it without performing what it meant. "Meridian Tower," he said. "I'll meet you in the lobby at 4. If you still want someone there." 4 o'clock, she said. She got in her car. Oliver watched it pull into traffic, then turned back to his own. Through the rear window he could see Luna, Biscuit pressed to her chest, working intently on the small notebook in her lap. He got in, started the engine, looked in the rearview mirror at his daughter. "What are you drawing now?" he asked. Luna looked up. She turned the notebook around so he could see. The house again, the same figures, the same rabbit, but she had added someone new. A figure standing just outside the front door, drawn in careful brown crayon, with what appeared to be long hair. Oliver looked at the drawing for a moment. He did not say anything. He put the car in reverse, checked the mirror, and pulled out of the lot. When they reached the first stoplight, Luna said, very seriously, "I gave her a door to walk through, but she has to open it herself." Oliver kept his eyes on the road. It was the second time he had smiled that day. This time, it stayed. There are afternoons that rearrange things not because the world changed around you, but because you finally stopped performing long enough to see what was already true. A man who owned what others dismissed. A woman who had learned to judge quickly and was now learning, for the first time, what that had cost her. A little girl with a stuffed rabbit who understood, without being taught, that the space you hold for someone is the most important thing you can offer. The light turned green. Oliver Bennett drove toward the Meridian Tower, his daughter drawing beside him, and did not hurry. Some things, when they are worth waiting for, are worth arriving to slowly.